faculty, relatives, and peers present. I wish I could explain this inextricable ball of emotion that creeps up my gut. If somehow I could only open myself and pour over this podium the thoughts and feelings that crowd my mind, everything would be easier and the speech would be completely useless. All I'm left with, however, are these miserable sounds mechanically produced by the vocal folds in my throat. Words. Simply a combination of scribbles on a page, combination of sounds to which we attribute meaning. As I've grown up, I've come to realize the abstractness, the ambiguity of these words which we use on a daily basis to live our lives. We take them for granted, these sounds, as if they're inherently meaningful, when they're not at all. One of the biggest flaws, in my opinion, with this arduous path of institutional education which culminates today is the way in which words are treated and taught. They're presented to us as these perfect encapsulating concrete blocks capable of explaining everything we feel and think. We have to pick and choose them and attempt to communicate and explain ourselves. They're presented to us as absolutes, as labels to which we adhere to rather than shape. Maybe I've precipitated myself and dived right into my existentialist discourse, also known as brisas. Those who know me and spend time with me are accustomed to these types of ramblings, be it about movies, music, politics, or soccer, and which are greatly exacerbated in both length and speed after a few beers. This is amongst my friends, however, who have grown accustomed to me, I hope. But since I stand in front of such a larger audience than the usual Maltos or Yoji and Ali, I'm going to try to pace myself so I can make myself a bit clearer. Since we were little kids, we were given these words, these 3 to 5 letter words which could explain everything. The best example being happy and sad. These two absolute labels were presented to us as a dichotomy. You were either one or the other. We were bombarded with the happy face and the sad face, which are exactly the same, except for one feature which is inverse of each other. As we grew and learned more words, did in numerous vocab quizzes, we expanded our vocabulary, but this fundamental dichotomy of being was never eliminated. We learned respiration to understand one of our fundamental bodily functions, or authoritarian to describe a certain type of state, or that the author chose blue curtains to symbolize the protagonist's sadness. Yet, I feel we never really learned about ourselves. Underlying all of this knowledge was always the supposition, the implication, that the same way that an 89% is a B and a 90% is an A, we as well exist within these absolutes. We're either good students or bad students. We either meet expectations or fail to meet them. We're either happy or sad. There is no place for contradiction. Everything has to make sense. One of the hardest realizations I've had as I've treaded the long path that now brings us here is realizing that we rarely ever exist in these absolutes, that we rarely ever live in dichotomous states. It's realizing that these labels, which we've been taught all our lives, pale tremendously in the face of human experience. It's realizing that most of the time you're a mixture of both happy and sad, that you can both love and hate the same person at the same time, that sometimes you want to stay, but you also long to go. We were never taught these contradictions. We were instead anchored to these all-encapsulating words, and it's scary to grow up and face these things that don't seem to make sense. My first reaction as I underwent this realization was to look at those older than me and question them. I thought, they must have gone through the same thing, the same difficulty. Why don't they tell us? Why don't they warn us about this? Yet I think the more painful realization has been to see that most people simply mute these contradictions. Instead of using words to explain and paint the contradictions we feel, we instead shape what we feel in accordance to these words, or even worse, decide not to feel at all. And I understand, of course I do, because it's scary to face this. How can one live one's life being both happy and sad? How can one seek happiness when it doesn't exist exclusively? Now, I'm not even going to attempt to answer these questions because I stand only at the doorstep of life. But as I look on at those that are way ahead, I wonder if they have an answer. I don't know if they do, and I don't know the answers. But that's the point. I don't know much. Why do we have to know? Why do we have to understand? Why do we have to justify time and time again what we feel, what we like, and what we want? What is this obsession with always having to make sense? And that's what's most enraged me about this system that we've been put through. It's always been about certainty. It's always been about the right answer over the wrong answer, about knowing what you are doing, knowing what you want to be. Now, don't take this wrong. This discharge against this larger system is not one against those who work it, you, teachers. In fact, what has led me to have this interpretation was largely shaped by some of the most amazing teachers I've had. Teachers who have led me off the path, who have helped me look around instead of always straight forward, teachers who admit that they don't always have an answer. Many of you sit here today, and I'm sure you know who you are. We all stand here before a world which is increasingly troubled and crippled. In my opinion, these are simply the bad fruits which have flowered from this system and this way of thinking. We are forced to explain and justify ourselves time and time again, and our ideals of success are closely married to our ideals of absolutes. A person's success and value in society is measured by absolute numbers and absolute labels. $1,000 is better than $500. A degree from one place is better than another. This cripples the individual. It internalizes the blame of being unable to reach a number or criteria above. It is no wonder then, in my opinion, that the population of the world is increasingly more depressed and that we are allowing the extremes, those who are so sure about themselves and so sure about what they say, to take control. This is when I now turn to you, class of 2016. You've made this pain of growing up bearable. It is you and the relationships that I have nurtured with you that has made me truly believe that a better world is possible. I can't imagine having faced all these doubts and uncertainties by myself. I just wish that we would have spent less time talking about summatives and retakes and spent more time, planning the revolution, but maybe that's just me. I hate to use this analogy, especially as we finish school, but I find it's the most fitting. I see every one of you as an essay, an English paper 1, if you will. Everything you do, you say, every decision you make, all construct and help build your argument, the statement that you are giving to the world. This ceremony represents our time to choose what it is we want to tell the world, to choose how we are going to define ourselves. This is our time, not theirs. Don't let their old words, labels, and expectations define you. Only you can define you. Now, I'm not going to tell you what your thesis should be. I'm constructing mine too, and that's a decision only you can take. However, the only thing that I say from the bottom of my heart and with all the sincerity in the world is that I hope no matter where you are, what situation you're in, you never forget your thesis. That one you thought up when you were 18 years old with all the hope in the world. Because what scares me most about this life that lays ahead of us is not pain or failure or bankruptcy. It's living a life devoid of meaning. That is why, as I finish my speech, I don't wish you success. That doesn't concern me. I wish you instead purpose. In the end, all I've offered here are words, those same ones that I said were meaningless at the beginning. But I found that words, a lot like life, are only worth as much as the worth that you give them. I've done my part by giving you these words. You take them any way you want. I hope, however, that they are worth at least something to you, and that I have been able to repay the honor of being given the chance to spit words in front of you. Thank you.